Hi guys, and welcome back to the Architecture Unknown podcast. Today we're going to talk about the concept of co-living. This is following a resurface of the debate in the construction industry, with cities like Manchester being the new target area for co-living development. With me are the usual suspects, Dan and Charlie, co-directors of Architecture Unknown. And before we get into the main topic, I believe Charlie has some news for us.
It's not really me that's having news. There's really only one big debate going on at the moment in architecture and planning. The Communities and Local Government Secretary, who's responsible for the planning system, Robert Jenrick, has announced new sweeping changes, potential changes to be made to the planning system, which will fundamentally change the way in which communities, local government, and applicants to the planning system, like developers and homeowners, can access planners' expertise and ultimately get their buildings approved. The essence of the scheme is that the majority of inner city planning development decisions will be predetermined by design codes, which will be created by local authorities, that will separate land into one of three categories, which I believe are a growth, protection, and
greenbelt.
Greenbelt. I think that's protection. As always, we're very much lacking on detail at this point as to what will actually happen. Really? So we're definitely very intrigued to see, but the horses are out of the gates with regards to impact and response. The RIBA has said that this will lead to a new generation of slum housing. And on Radio 4 today, the Community Secretary was there defending that his new proposed planning scheme changes, saying that was nonsense. Who to believe? I'm not sure. I think, just to open it out to you guys, what is your opinion on design codes as a method for determining planning?
Well, I see two issues with this. Two issues, and I think you mentioned one is obviously the design code. How do you stop poor quality housing being built here? Are we doing a typical Tory thing where we leave it up to the free market? The good people will, and the good developers will build good houses, because obviously morals, are what drives developers and people who make money. Morals is a key thing. And so unless we gotta go and redevelop somehow in the space of maybe a month or two, a design code that will govern all these things, then what's going to happen is it's going to be a free-for-all, and people are just going to just spam houses everywhere, tower blocks, houses, whatever it may be. I think the other issue as well is possibly a lack of joined-up thinking here. Maybe is that who's going to further develop these master plans? These councils are going to use to designate these areas. Master plans take years of studying and work and in the community and so how are they going to just turn around and go, actually wait a second, we're going to designate that and that as 1, 2 and 3? No, it's going to take years. So this change is not going to happen overnight. It's a 5-6 year scheme really. So so I don't think this idea of build and we're going to be doing it in the next month or two is pure nonsense, unless they literally go, we're just going to push it through and let the market decide and see what happens, which is...
Yeah, I mean, I've got two problems as well, different problems. The firstly is about enforcement. I mean, the point of this is that planners have been apparently such a roadblock to development that getting them out of the way is a good thing. Obviously, that's rubbish. There's over 1 million undeveloped planning granted schemes that have not been undertaken.
Why is that though,
Say again?
Why is that? Is that possibly land banking by any chance?
Could be something along those lines, God knows. But ultimately, if planners are then tasked not with the very limited sort of design front-end role that they have at the moment, and which I would like to see expanded personally, but are then tasked essentially with enforcement action, that's just moving the buck. They just become a roadblock at a different point in the process when the schemes are half built and the planners stand in the way and saying, listen, that doesn't conform with the local plan that you're meant to be following. What happens then? And then my other thought was about the fundamental fact that granting planning permission is an enormous monetary incentive. And as we've sort of touched on, land banking is a massive problem where developers or landowners will receive planning permission or fight for planning permission for the maximum number of houses and then not build them because they're just looking to sell. They're looking to sell land with planning. So that cash uplift is always captured by developers. And ultimately, this is just going to make that problem worse, surely. Make it easier to get planning and mean that that money is easier to release in theory. But why would developers build? Because they still have no desire to flood the market with properties. That just devalues their stock. So why would they do it? This just means that there will be more money in the hands of private developers and the cost of housing will rise.
It's just fundamentally what they've done here is go, oh, let's think of a policy, we want to change something, but they haven't thought of the whole ecosphere of how all this works. You know, it's like, you know, let's just change one thing, but then not realize there's an impact elsewhere. You know, you can't just, you know, it's like an ecosphere, you know, a bio, you know, sphere. You can't kill one animal because that's a link of a chain all the way along. You know, you can't, you know, take out spiders, you know, they'll be overrun by flies, you know. So we need to, you know, and that's the, you know, you can't just make one change. You got to change how the whole process works through. And this is going to be an absolute disaster if they try to push us through. And like you said, Charlie, that you know, you're so right about that. What will happen? I think for me, if they want to change the planning process, firstly, pay them more and hire more of them.
Planning officers.
So they can actually get their work done. But secondly, tie planning with building regs like they do in Germany. So you can't get plan permission unless you have actually fully resolved the building to a certain level to get building regs. And then you know that that's, you know, it's a viable project. So a lot of builders and contractors won't then go, you know, will follow through and get things built because the effort and the money to get to that level usually kind of, you know, will mean, all right, well, this is going to actually happen, you know, so instead of that speculation.
Possible. I mean, I think
a better chance of happening, obviously, you know, a better chance of happening.
Yeah. I mean, if it was me to approve the planning process, just double down on the amazing work that public practice have been doing and embedding design thinking in planning departments. Fundamental to a smooth planning process is an understanding of design thinking. And it's quite shocking how little emphasis is placed on that in the planning system, in my opinion. Sean, what are you thinking about all this?
I'm happy for us to jump onto the main topic.
Oh, I see. I see our resident developer, the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah. New position means I'm not taking sides on this one.
Sean. I think we can safely say that Sean absolutely 100% agrees with absolutely everything that's been said so far in this podcast.
Sean, do you want to introduce it or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just wanted to start off by explaining the kind of concept of co-living for those who don't actually understand it. So the original concept of co-living was about being together in one space and sharing facilities such as bathrooms and kitchens. And with more recent developments, there's been inclusions of cinemas, gyms, working spaces, co-working spaces, etc. The developers have described this new model as an innovative concept in residential development, centering itself around community and social involvement to provide vibrant work lives. With one of the other ideas being to reduce the urban loneliness with many people in their 20s to 30s not getting into relationships till later on in life. So we're also bloody lonely.
Oh yeah, very lonely.
Yeah. The typology originally took off in USA with early examples such as the Hacker's House in Silicon Valley, which, funnily enough, Mark Zuckerberg invested in during the early days of Facebook, with the intention that you could live with like-minded people and pursue ideas and startups. Yeah.
And if Mark Zuckerberg investing in something isn't a mark of approval, then what is?
Yeah, that's.
Wait, so where do I get these shares? I want some of these shares.
Of course, we didn't see it in the UK till later on, with some of the first examples were seen in Canary Wharf and Old Oak Common. However, it faced early criticism over the size of its rooms, and which you guys, I'm sure, will agree, and cost of the amount of space that you actually get. It's often been labelled as a glorified dorms for grown-ups or lonely people. So I'm going to open it up to you guys.
Harsh. That's harsh.
Is co-living dorms for adults or a solution to urban loneliness and affordable dwellings?
I want to jump in here because before we go any further, I'm actually a fan of this, right? Of co-living, right? I live in co-living right now. It's how it's extrapolated.
You lonely, man.
I'm not lonely.
Just
I don't think I am.
a lonely single person.
I was going to say, yeah, maybe I'm a lone single person. Yeah. Out for dinner, just drop, send me a letter, and I'll respond. Of course. But
Don't turn this into a fishing expedition for you, Dan. This is not a Lonely Hearts Club podcast.
No, don't be that. I am not a lonely person, and where was I? Yeah. So wait. So this, where I live at the moment is with 3 people. It is fundamentally co-living. Across the whole of Manchester, there are people living together in 3 or 4, maybe 5 and 6 bed houses, sharing a kitchen. So it's not a new idea. So I don't see an issue with the premise of it. I think it is quite a good way to live for people in their 20s, young professionals, we call it. But where I get the problem,
to just add on to that, Dan, you see the community led housing schemes that are looking for a minimal lifestyle, who think that sharing their facilities together makes practical sense. Childcare facilities, the ability to cook group meals, having friends and neighbors who you actually trust in a local area. Yes to all of these things. As you said, extrapolation is the problem.
I mean, I was back home in Ireland recently, and I noticed that there's a big fight over co-living as well in Dublin. For example, there was a developer had already got plan permission for 22 high-end houses down in Ballsbridge. It's kind of a posher area of Dublin, but it decided to change that and put a new planning application in for, I think it was 150 plus co-living houses. So you can see the difference of what was going on that site. Was 22, fair enough, it was high end, but there were big apartments and high costly, but it went to 22 to 150. So you're looking at here to develop, what that comparison is, what we're getting, and I think that says a lot. And like Sean was saying, his reaction was saying like 40% of people in Dublin are single. So why would they not want to live in co-living places? I think they were offering 22 rooms and a kitchen, that sort of thing, 20 rooms and a kitchen. I think there was that level, of shared spaces, which I think is horrendous. So yeah, it's I read a really good quote about it, and it's damn, I can't find it. Where is it now? But yeah, it's about temporal living, and we have community, but what we've actually done is actually not create community in these houses. It's completely taken away from them. Everyone's the same age. There's no age difference. There's no diversity. There's no like you said, what's the point of having nurseries in there, because there won't be any families living in there. So that's you don't create community just by having
lots of people in a small space. Anyone who's had housemates knows that.
Not living in one space.
Most of us can probably sit here and agree that the idea of community is all well and good, but what the criticism is of co-living is the actual size of the units that they're providing. And this is where it started talking about glorified dorms and how they're getting away with space standards by having shared facilities that contribute to the overall unit. So we've got these co-living units because they're not included in the Manchester residential design guide, which outlines, it's very similar to the London spatial standards, but it outlines from studio to three bed, 6 person, outlines all the space. But if you look at some of the more recent developments, they're coming out at less than 20 square meters for a single unit. And not everyone wants to go into co-living. Like Charlie yourself, you're looking to get onto the housing market, as am I. I don't want to live in rented accommodation. I want to have my own property rather than my rent. I'd rather pay towards something as a mortgage than be stuck on the rent, generation for the rest of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it comes down to I don't know. I mean, it may be quite a white middle class male thing to think about, but can you really put down roots in a place like that and actually grow as a person when you're in such a small space? I don't know. I find it somewhat offensive in some ways.
I'm going to throw a spanner in your works, right? So you're saying it's 13 square meters, yeah?
Yeah, minimum is 18.
20, yeah. What's the size of your bedroom now?
About 12, I would have guessed.
It would have to be 12.
If even. Yeah. So what you're actually providing is actually larger than what I'm getting, what maybe you got, or what you got, Sean, at the moment.
Well,
on a space thing, fair enough, you got to share with more people in the kitchen, but if it's done correctly, what you're doing is maybe you're sharing maybe 2 or 3 more people, but actually maybe you're getting exactly the same amount of provision. So maybe where is the issue here? Is it actually the fact that it's stacking all these people up and you have no diversity and no different types of living and different forms of living, and what you get is a very certain type of community all living all in stacks? Or is it that people want to have their own houses and demand their own houses and feel like they deserve their own houses and their own space?
For me, the biggest issue here is that having housemates is one thing. Those houses that have 5-6 bedrooms that are, you find in the suburbs of Manchester, Didsbury, Chorlton, so those types of houses are, out there, out in the suburbs. We're really talking about a massive densification in the city centre to do jobs that they're calling key worker, but actually fundamentally, key worker demographics have shifted massively. We're not always and becoming increasingly less true. We're not talking about young people anymore. We're actually talking about middle-aged and getting into older people taking on service roles that have traditionally been designed for the youth. And that's a massive issue, good point. Because those people are not going to be able to really live in this type of apartments. I think we can fundamentally say that the only people who will be willing to look at this are people who are recently graduated or looking to get on the housing ladder quickly. They are going to be young people.
Or desperate and have no options, and they're forced to take one of those spaces, even though it doesn't suit their way of living.
So we're excising a massive portion of the necessary population from the city centre. And for what? If that type of housing is necessary, then it's necessary out in the suburbs as well. Then why is it not there? If we're saying this is a good thing, if all the developers spiel is saying, oh, this is about community, it's about shared costs, it's about ecological sustainability. If that's true, then it's needed out in the suburbs as much as it's needed in the city centre, because that's where the people who, who maybe would like that sense of community will need it, and want it.
One of the key demographics that they've discussed is the idea of a student transitioning from dorms to co-living and then finding somewhere more long-term. So co-living's not been labelled as a long-term. It's a key to attract people in, and then they'll find somewhere where they can actually grow roots, as you say, John.
Because it perpetuates that rent cycle where money can keep going up and up and up, and you don't want permanence. This economy, the way we do things, is built on that. It ties back into you guys all wanting to buy houses because rent is so unstable that we know it's going up and up and up. So what's the point, of paying to someone all the time? That's the and this is only going to further perpetuate it, isn't it? It's tying us back into that renter's economy.
Well, the co-living model is used in larger metropolitan areas which face affordability crisis, which, as we know with Manchester, it's had issues before with hitting its targets with affordable units.
0% affordable at one stage in the
0.1%.
0.1%.
Well, supposed to be 20 in Manchester again. 20%. Yeah.
So for new developments, you mean?
Yeah, new developments. Yeah.
Seems like a way for developers to say, "Oh, we're providing affordable housing," but really they're just providing less. It's not affordable; it's just less.
It becomes affordable because there's no space.
Yeah. 10% below market value on a very, very small property is much less of a loss than 10% below market value on a 4-bedroom house.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And how's it going to impact the cost of 1- and 2-bed units now if we're creating what is like a subpar standard for 1- and 2 beds?
Undercutting the market, essentially.
Yeah.
So you'll see price rises in rented accommodation as well.
I've another question for this. Where are all these people coming from that are coming to live in all these houses?
Yeah.
Are we draining the suburbs, which is maybe good, and that's maybe okay because we're getting or is it just been draining, places like Oldham and Rochdale, or are we draining London or from overseas? Where are all these people coming from? You know,
I think all of the above that you just said.
Is there in these viability assessments, is there a viability assessment about where these people are coming from and how they're going to, you know, showing increase of population? I know we obviously have an increase in population in this country. You know, every year we grow and grow, but and we need more houses. But you know, if I feel like we're providing only houses for people between 20 and 29.
Yeah, what it feels like to me is that there's a massive gap, you know, in the housing provision, you know, because the big volume house builders will focus on a 4-bed house that they can sell for 400 grand. And then at the other end of the market, we're seeing this growth in co-living spaces, you know, rabbit hutches for students, flats, yeah. You know, and so where's the middle ground for starter homes for first-time buyers? I think it's mental. I think it's mental, and I think it's just exclusionary, you know, for older people from the city centre, because a whole economy will, in that, you know, around these spaces will change and shift towards a younger economy, or services, you know, geared towards younger people. And so what about the older people? Are they no longer welcome in the city centre? And how does that affect sharing your generational space?
That's not community, is it?
That's not community.
We're obviously not. We're not. You know, they're not proposing every single building, you know, from now on is going to be built like this. You know, there's pockets of these. I mean, and as we'll see later, is, you know, a large pocket of one of them. But you know, it's more about an argument of is co-living the right way forward, or should we be discarding co-living and you know, actually looking at co-housing? You know, examples like, you know, Marmalade Lane, and, you know, which is cross between co-living and co-housing, you know, largely co-housing.
Some shared facilities, there's lots of actual community engagement there.
I think the model certainly needs testing, but, you know, last year we were seeing articles that Manchester City Council were going to restrict development on co-living units, and now we've got schemes coming in, one that was submitted in January this year that was for over 2,000 units. So that's not exactly testing, is it?
And then throw into that the new development planning ideals by Jenrick, and you know, we're going to see, you know, brilliant. I got a site here I can plop on, you know, instead of doing 22 houses, I can do 150 houses, you know, and, you know, increase my margins by more, you know. So, ching ching ching, here we go.
And it's definitely not going to have the same kind of explosive rate as build to rent or purpose-built student accommodation. It actually sits in the middle of those two typologies.
Yeah, well, I think if you couple that with the new planning rules, or, you know, it may be a growth, because developers will always automatically go for what's the easiest option and what's the most money-making option, most profitable. Yeah.
I mean, everything's slowed down as a result of the lockdown and COVID-19 at the moment, which is actually brings us on to the next kind of point, which is, you know, we've been under lockdown for the last 6 months as a result of the pandemic, of which we don't have a cure yet. And now we're talking about residential developments that actually increase the social interactions between tenants and the chances of you running into a new flatmate or someone in one of these co-working spaces, or the gym or the cinema. And, you know, surely this typology is compromised with the new regulations on COVID-19. And I don't know, I'm wondering if, does that require stricter hygiene protocols with this co-living?
They're essentially the cruise ships of the built environment, aren't they? You know, you know, closed boxes with lots and lots of contact that you can't escape.
It's a tough one, because, you know, there is a problem in our society at the moment with people feeling lonely and, you know, and things like that. But we're obviously not, you know, we need to increase, you know, I think we've learned that we increase, you know, community and engagement in how we live. I don't think this obviously answers that, because you're just putting people in really small boxes. Yeah. Like I said, I think the premise of co-living is very beneficial and very good when it's done correctly. But yeah, like you said, 2,000 people, that literally is like a ship, isn't it? 2,000 people, you know, there we go, the Titanic. You know.
Do you think it's the right time to start talking about this type of unit, though, Dan?
I don't see an issue with it, because personally, we got a plan for 100 years down the line. So I think the bigger question is, you know, is this typology suitable for next 50, 60, 100 years of living? And I don't think it is. I think there's an element of it which is actually probably right about the co-living and the co-working, having all the working spaces there. I think that's really, really beneficial. But yeah, I really don't think it's done the right way and in the right.
It's about scale and about ownership. And at the end of the day, this is done for profit, massive profits, and not really because it's a community asset. I'm not for it personally.
Well, you only have to look at the some of the documents in the planning website for how much profit these developers are taking out of these schemes. It's mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing the amount of profit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, developers need a 25% because in case they find something in the ground and it takes all their profit away. But we're in a broken system and a broken economic system in this country, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go on, Charlie.
I was just going to say, and in terms of resilience, you know, we can say that in the cut today, there's a likelihood that those apartments will be occupied, but God knows what will happen. You know, if we did have another, you know, serious incident with a virus, or there was a downturn in the market as a result of this, or the market never picks back up again, how long before these become, you know, parking ground for the people who are poorest and least looked after? And at what point do they just degrade socially from being these utopian high-rise towers from some sort of science fiction film to becoming the human presence in, you know, 1978? You know,
absolutely bang on. I think Shelter have come out this week and said exactly the same thing about a couple of schemes that are being proposed in Manchester, which I think probably draws us on to, before we run out of time, guys, I think it draws on to our hot and not. And I suppose we might as well start with Sean, because this follows on very, you know, strongly from what we've been talking about here.
Okay, guys, let's move swiftly on to our hot or not section of this podcast. We'll start with the not today. And based on the topic, I've found quite a suitable not to talk about. It's actually a local one in Manchester, which was submitted for planning earlier this year in January by Simpson & Huff, who else, and developer and contractor Downing for a over 2,200 bedroom co-living scheme on First Street, which is supposedly going to open a new gateway into Manchester.
Doesn't even make sense. Oh, God.
Yeah, I like how when you said Simpson Huff, you could have easily replaced it with like the devil incarnate and had the same tone and inflection. It would have made sense.
There must be no one in the office. They literally just, you know, all you do is go copy paste.
Well, you say that the facade design is looking very typical of Simpson and Huff. So you know, the development includes 4 buildings which vary in height from, I believe it's 10 stories to 45 stories, with the main tower facing onto the junction. The co-living spaces include, I think it's 11 different unit types, accommodation types, and I think the smallest that it goes down to is about 18 square meters, which means that the shared space adds on to that in order for them to reach the kind of space standards. The problem with this scheme is that with a 2,200 unit scheme for a model that's untested during a time where we've just coming out of lockdown after the COVID-19 situation.
Or are we going back in? Who knows?
Is this the right time for a scheme such as this?
Sean, is there ever a right time for a scheme like this? You know, didn't Shelter come out and said, like, you know, we're just building slums of the future. You know, 2,000 rooms. You know, is it units? I presume some of those units as well are. I know some of them are 4 beds, so there's actually going to be more than 2,000 people in that.
There's actually 5 bedrooms as well.
You mean?
And over 800 studio apartments. I mean, I was more referring to the fact there's 2 issues. There's not just the scale of it for an untested model, it's just the timing of it is horrendous, when there's also 2 other smaller co-living proposals that I believe they're in for planning now, that would be better to test them first before you commit to this massive scheme that they're proposing.
I think that the testing thing, though, would take years to really, you know, digest what was happening as a result of these. I mean, the thing is, developers have always been, but are getting increasingly good at just selling this crap to everyone. You know, and so they'll say that this is all about community. You know, it's all about community. It's all about, you know, the lifestyles and, you know, the urban nomad. But it's bollocks, because, you know, you don't get community in a group of strangers. You know, it doesn't
mass
happen.
Strangers,
And you know what creates community is shared experiences and shared endeavor, and there's nothing like that here. These are anonymous, temporary, you know, rabbit hutches for the ex-student class who are looking to get anywhere else but here, and the poor key workers who have never, you know, reached, you know, escape velocity to have moved on out of those roles that are not, you know, fundamentally not designed for people who are older, or, you know, approaching middle age, but who are, you know, find themselves in that situation increasingly on 0 hours contracts.
And I have no problem with the idea, like we said before earlier, about the idea and the concept of co-living, but it's that how it's extrapolated out. You know, yes, a big, you know, we want to build towers. Unfortunately, we've no kind of way around this, but we need mixed tenure. We need mixed kind of ideals and ideologies mixed together. We need families in the building. We need, you know, we need spaces for the older generations. We need for the younger generation. It needs to be mixed communities. You don't build a community out of 3,000 people who are all aged between 21 and 28. You don't. You know, if you make a community at a nightclub, you know, it's the same. You know, you just have
you have a tribe, but not a community, and it's just not.
Yes, I understand that throughout Manchester, the co-living experience is happening, but like, never mind the visuals and the inward-looking designs of the building and this plinth that is sitting on, or the fact that you can fit, you know, all the designs for the facade, you know, options on like 2 pages in the DNA statement, just says it all about just how repetitive and dull. More glass boxes again. We just keep building the same crap over and over again. So it's a separate thing. Never mind the co-living issue, but, you know, lucky you know, it has been batted back initially from planning, but we all know how these things plan out in the end. It'll all go through, you know, and it'll all be, you know, be accepted by the hierarchy once, you know, the money is realized, how much, you know, they're going to gain from it. And yeah, slums of the future will be created.
Well, they were supposed to reach a decision on last month, July the 30th, and they've actually deferred the decision at the moment.
Well, they're on holidays for August as well, so yeah, it won't be until September at the very earliest.
I mean, when you actually start interrogating the plans, it's no different to any other high-rise scheme that you see in Manchester. You know, standard car parks, gym, co-working areas. These don't, as you say, encourage community. Like, you can put a group of strangers in the room, it doesn't make them want to, you know, do stuff together.
That's right.
And this is why it's kind of this hybrid between what you see with build to rent and purpose-built student accommodation. It just sits in the middle. It's actually near all the student university buildings.
Conveniently,
and right near our offices as well.
Not that influences our decision at all. I mean, for me, the thing that strikes me from the plans is that the sparsity of those communal services. I mean, from my understanding of it, and I might be wrong, but it looks like there's only major services at the bottom and at the top. So we're talking 2, you know, areas of significant, you know, group spaces
in a 44-story building.
For a 44-story building with, you know, however many thousands of people living there. I mean, it's all well and good saying, well, we're going to share facilities and share a kitchen. Yes, but not with 200 other households. That's ridiculous.
There must be small kitchens. There must be small kitchens on each level, but they're not going to be vast considering the amount of people that are going to be using. And yes, of course, each apartment has its own sink and one hob, you know, for cooking vast dinners on. Definitely won't be good enough for me, because most days I end up using at least 2 or 3, if not all 4 hobs when I'm cooking my dinner at times, depending on what I'm doing. But, you know, and the oven as well. You know, I mean,
but the thing that
cheese every day, you're grand, or sticking a pizza in the oven.
But they were talking about the effects of being in lockdown on your kind of mental health just within a normal 1 to 2 bed apartment, which is twice the size. Imagine being locked in a dorm because you're trying to restrict going into the main shared space. Sticking to your 20 square meter dorm during that time, drive you mental. It would be like being in a prison or something.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the cruise ships of the urban environment. Highly exposed areas with lots of different households all living together with no actual real space or amenity. you know.
Good point, Jim. Yeah, and then you got that lovely green tile that looks like it's falling off on the base.
I was just going to bring that up.
It doesn't. On its own, I fully understand. It's almost like someone in the office has been told, right, we're doing the standard glass box, right? But I'm going to give you Mr. or Mrs. Creative Architect over in the corner there, a chance to to do something a little bit different. And someone went mad on the bottom bit. It obviously doesn't match at all with the top part, in my opinion, at all.
It doesn't.
Yeah. Let's do the standard Simpson block, but you got a chance to be a little bit creative on the bottom, and that's what's happened in my opinion, and it doesn't work for me. I don't know what all you people think. We'll show an image here, and let us know what your thoughts are. Maybe we're just being NIMBYs or wrong, or but if you look at the images, I mean, there's no relation to the streets around it. It's it feels like it's back a house the whole way around, like 2 stories. I know it comes down at one point to meet the ground somewhere, but
I think the podium does a bit to engage with people on street level. However, on the main junction, you see the start of the hill and the skyscraper. The frontage of it doesn't address anyone. It's only when you go around the back alleys that you might get some engagement from it.
A little bit. I just don't feel that, because there's going to be more towers built on the park beside it as well, and those buildings beside it. It's just
the whole thing for me is just underlined by the fact that there's absolutely no effort to making affordable housing, and the developers' profits are in the region of 200,000. Say again.
200,000. If they put the affordability down to zero, there's going to be an excess of 200 grand in the whole scheme supposedly. So there's no point then putting any affordable housing in there, because then it'll eat into their 15%. 15% seems like a low number, doesn't it, Charlie? But how much is that again overall?
Oh, it's in the region of 50 to 60 million pounds.
40. They put it in now as 45 million. That's how much profit the developers taking out of this scheme, and they can't do any affordable housing in there at all.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? Because when we price a job, our fees in terms of percentage would reduce as the size of the job increases. So for a £2 million, you might be charging 2 to 3%. For a 75,000, you'd be charging 10%. And so our fees are grading that way. But it seems like the developers either go flat or twist up towards the higher ends, and it makes no moral sense. How can you justify
45 million? Yeah, you might find a bit of dirty clay in there that might have to burn a bit of hole in your profit. But I guarantee you, what will happen is that 15% will stay. House prices will go up.
Yeah, and they will make more than 15% profit, because don't remember, these are just pre-construction evaluations, subject to the rigors of construction, yes, where things might go wrong, but also where developers are extremely experienced at making things go right for them.
But also, they're extremely experienced at making sure the figures that are put in are on the high end, so their actual percentage doesn't go below, but it's got a better chance of going up. They're not going to be like, oh, well, yeah, well, we're going to price this at the very low end. We're going to price it at the high end to give us leg room and maneuverability. So, but unless things change with Section 108 and how things are marked up, and never going to.
And it's the same thing again and again and again that we see it. And I know we've mentioned Grenfell Tower several times in these podcast series, but that is exactly what happened in Grenfell Tower. Underpricing of the job led to corners being cut so that the developer could maintain their profit margin.
Yeah, instead of losing the profit and building to what they said they were going to build, it went the other way, because profit is what drives this bloody country. Yeah. And eking every single penny out. So everyone, it's greed. It's pure and utter greed. 45 million. There's no reason for a developer to earn 45 million from that scheme.
And
unless we're getting it wrong, unless we're misunderstanding, where that money goes or what's going on with it. And obviously it's used to get the next stage of the next project on the way and that kind of stuff. But there's people here that's getting filthy rich off this. Never mind people getting rich off the buying of the flats and then renting them out at extra cost. It's just
absolutely. And that is the gulf between co-living at this scale and co-living at a sort of few houses and a community
human scale.
Human scale. Thank you. That's exactly.
And speaking of human scale, I suppose that brings us to the hot building, which I suppose kind of merges some of the ideals and things that we've been talking about, but in a positive way, not a negative way. It's not quite co-living, but it's not quite co-housing, but it shows kind of a positive way to actually, to develop houses and housing schemes. And that's the Nightingale schemes, which are in Australia. Hopefully we can bring them over here or see, ideals of them over here. It does kind of reflect the Bau group and ideology that you see in Germany. But fundamentally, Nightingale Housing is a call home for people. It is a leading housing revolution in the cities of Australia by facilitating the delivery of housing that is financially, socially, environmentally sustainable. And that's not just buzzwords. Literally, they are driving forward new ideals and new ways of developing houses. Fundamentally, it is architecture-led. This was an idea developed by some architects, I think, along with some developers as well, to firstly encourage good design, but also to change the way housing schemes are developed. They're usually about 20 to 40 units in a scheme. They aim for all the schemes to be right close to public transport. Some of the schemes, they actually have 0 spaces for parking. It's been quite a challenge over there, as it would here, to try and bring that through, but they have pushed it through. So they're really trying to kind of change that model. Profits are capped at 15%. I think over in Australia, the average kind of developer would be looking at a minimum to take 17-18%, maybe up to 20-25%. So what they've done is try to kind of lower that and encourage people to go, you know what, maybe I don't actually need to take that much money out of it. But like we mentioned before, that big scheme, some of the profits are technically there because of uncertainty. You know, I think 30% of flats and houses that are sold don't go through in the UK. So that adds an uncertainty and extra costs and all that sort of stuff. So the Nightingale project brings people together before these schemes are actually happened and actually developed. They are on a list. You gotta pay a £5,000 deposit. So that removes the uncertainty of losing people. So the developer whoever comes in on board as a developer has more certainty. So there won't be extra costs down the end. What else is there as well? Oh yeah, the idea is that it's designed as well to reduce operating and maintenance costs. They use a very kind of stripped back raw design. So to try and, I think, maybe take out maybe 10% of the actual cost of the actual build as well by, exposing services and stuff like that. I think it's a really interesting. These are very interesting homes as well, and kind of unique homes. I think some of the kind of other key things are deliberative design, so meaningful and informed participation from these future homeowners across the project, from design through to settlement. Purchasers are given real cost information during the design process to support informed decisions. I must highlight here that there is, before someone signs up, they don't actually know the final cost of the building. There will be a ballpark figure, and there'll be a little give or take on the percentage up or down. But the person who signs up to this is aware of these possible slight changes. But everything is done, in the best possible way to make sure there is no uplift, and any profits that come back actually go not to the developer, but to the actual client. So if there's money saved instead of like a wood and glass scheme we're talking about, developers' profit will go from maybe 15, 16 to 20. This cannot happen in this scheme. It'll stay at 15 max, and the client will take the money, which I think is a wonderful idea. I don't see why we allow developers to take so much profit, but I also don't see why. It's a new way of kind of looking at things. What are your, from your understanding, guys? What do you think of how this is done?
I just think it encourages the right attitudes for developers, so they know that they're going to make some money, but there's a shared risk there, and that's, I think, the ultimately the best way of running contracts for building is shared risk, where the developer knows that they can trust the client group or the client to protect their profit in essence, but the client can trust the developer not to take the piss and build something that's so crap that in an effort to try and inflate their profits unreasonably, because they know that they won't get it. They won't get that extra saving. That will have to be passed on. So it's a much more trusting way of building, and I think it leads to better quality. There is whole suites of contracts in the UK, like the NEC contract suite is designed around that ideal, but rarely used. And there is an attitude, I think, in the UK that is completely anti-cooperation, where everyone has to be in it for themselves. Otherwise, there's no trust. You can trust everyone to be self-interested, but not trust them to do the right thing for you. So I think that's sad, and I think we need to change that. But I think that this might be one way to go.
I think that's one for me is one of the key aspects of this project, which is really successful. And whether that can be transferred to the UK is another thing. Obviously, there's elements of this build of this scheme as well that has some co-housing ideals. Everyone signs up to kind of policies and charters. They're expected to put a little bit of impact to the community to make sure they work together to kind of look after their own areas. Every building has whole rooftop is a shared growing space. So there's a little, they have maybe some shared laundry facilities, a few things like that, and shared bike schemes. So I think it's about taking some of those kind of really great community ideals that, you know, proper co-housing and proper co-living have, but also then looking at how these buildings are actually delivered and procured in a different way as well. So I think there's a real lovely kind of marriage between the two there that personally I think would be really successful in the UK if there was, you know, the appetite for someone to go, you know what, no, I don't need to make so much money. Yes, they still make money. Now, 50% is still not a bad percentage for any developer involved in this. So we're not asking them to make a loss or make even, you know, low money, but it's about, you know, trying to kind of, you know, buy into the shared ideals and, you know, as I said, the uncertainty, and if you take that out, you know, it's less stress for the developer as well. So it's probably more fun and more interesting building to build. You know, it's not just a standard block of houses. These are you know, architect led, so they're high end design, and they're also involved in the community as well in that design process as well. So you get really interesting buildings. We'll show some of the images here, and go check it out because yeah, they look really cool, and I really want to live in one. I'll be perfectly honest.
Just looking at some of the images, you see a much higher attention to the design quality already. Very minimalist in terms of the actual spatial design, but it's the materials that they use, and it comes across very industrial, but then some areas.
That's because, you know, like, instead of wasting money on plasterboard, they're like, well, we'll just expose we'll leave the surfaces exposed and, you know, celebrate what is fundamentally what makes that building work. So you save money on those kind of elements. You know?
And, you know, you may save enough that you can afford to spend a bit more on those high-end materials that, you know, really shine, that people actually touch. I mean, how often do you go around touching your ceiling? What's it really doing? Whereas your worktops are for your kitchen. Let's throw a bit more money in there and have something really nice that we actually use every single day.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's so I think for me that's a nice way to kind of, you know, finish the podcast, because we're on a positive view. Because we ought to be positive, and maybe it did sound a bit negative at times, but co-living is a great idea when it's done correctly, and co-housing is a wonderful idea when it's done correctly. And one of the great things about the Nightingale communities are they're mixed tenure as well. It's for families, it's for older people, it's for young people. It's not just one segment of the population, you know, young professionals. It's a mixture of everyone and everything, you know, and it's tailored that way, which is great. And it creates communities. That's how we make communities.
So, and sort of in the spirit of positivity, next week we're going to actually be delving deeper into what some of our favourite co-housing, community-led housing schemes are. We're going to be exploring the positive sides of that movement, having done a bit of a dig into the negative sides. And we'll see how community housing really can change the world that we're living in. So I really hope you guys tune in for that one. It might be a couple of weeks, but we'll be back. So for the meantime, it's goodbye from me, and have a nice weekend.
Goodbye.